Instead, we have Gargiji to read for us. So you want to begin?
Nourishing himself with whatever he finds, wearing anything at all, full of peace, living anywhere, he is liberated. He, the self of all beings. Abhinavagupta Paramatasara, verse 69.
Okay, so that's an interesting epigraph to that. It struck me that he's describing a hippie. So it's the hippie ideal. Actually was the hippie ideal in the 60s. A realized being wearing anything at all, full of peace, moving around, liberated. So that's the picture that Abhinavagupta draws. The Shaivite sage, liberated from all externals, not needing anything, completely self-sufficient, radiant with the joy of the self, living anywhere. Probably in Byron Bay. Okay, go on.
I was raised in a family and culture that placed enormous importance on education. Of course, I mean first education. In that world, you moved higher and higher on a scale of worth as you acquired degrees, BA, MA, PhD. You could make a lateral move towards a professional degree, medicine or law, but always self-worth and status came not from money, but from education. There were loopholes for artists and other noble primitives, but the sure path was by means of steady progress through the educational system.
Of course, when I say first education, many of you will know that I mean our conventional education. And spiritual education, or sadhana, I call second education. So in the hierarchy of first education, I'm describing that movement of the scale. Go ahead.
About the same time, I realized that my own academic process was bringing me disappointingly little personal satisfaction. I became aware of the other educational hierarchy. In this second system, you do not progress via degrees granted by universities, but by inner landmarks known only to yourself, in which you grow in wisdom and joy. The PhD in this inner education is called by different names in different schools of inner second education: self-realization, enlightenment, Buddhahood, Satori, Samadhi, God realization, and so on. But every school agrees that the goal is some form of higher awareness. One of the major turning points in my life was a meeting with the American spiritual teacher Ram Dass at a dinner party in Chicago in early 1970. That night, I first heard about yoga in a meaningful way. What I took away from my discussion with him was this: there are enlightened beings on the planet now. This struck me as a shattering, life-transforming idea. To feel certain that such beings were here now, not 5,000 years ago. Beings like Jesus and Buddha were on earth and had attained that state. They understood the purpose of life and how to live. I knew that I did not have that understanding. I also knew that even though I moved in academic circles, among people who were extremely well educated and had spent a lot of time thinking about things, I knew that not one of them had it either. There was an indefinable conviction in the way that Ram Dass told me his story. He had gone to India and found a great guru named Karoli Baba, whom I later met. I was convinced that he was telling the truth. That evening changed the direction of my life. Suddenly there was a real answer. I was determined to find a teacher, work with him, and discover the truth.
In other words, I moved from first education to second education. And I didn't even know that such a path existed until that evening. I mean, my soul was stirring, and I was looking for answers, but I didn't know that there was such a thing as a path or answers or anything. Next section of the book, the goal, self-realization.
To be a yogi, to search for self-realization, is not one of the widely held goals of our culture. I was voted most likely to succeed by my high school class, but I wonder what my old friends say behind my back about the odd, to them, choices that I've made in my life. Nonetheless, there are many cultures in which goals in second education are acknowledged and understood. Still, in today's world, it remains an esoteric goal.
That makes a big difference, isn't it? That it doesn't exist in our culture, or maybe it's starting to exist now. But that in India, for example, it's in the culture. It's a possibility somehow, however dimly understood. That makes a whole difference about whether a culture is supportive of this kind of endeavor. So, where are we?
Every strong spiritual path has the ideal of enlightenment or self-realization at its core. An Islamic scholar writes, "The perfected Sufi is great, exalted, he is sublime."
The Sufi is, of course, parallel to the yogi. In Islam, the mystic side of Islam is Sufism. And tying it to what we do, Baba loved the Sufis. He must have been Islamic in past life, several past lives, but he loved the Sufi stories, the Sufi saints, the Sufi poetry. Kabir was his favorite poet, possibly. And he always did Sheikh Nasruddin stories, who was a Sufi figure. So there's a quote about the Sufis. The perfected Sufi is sublime.
Through love, work, and harmony, he has attained the highest degree of mastership. All secrets are open to him, and his whole being is suffused with magical effulgence. He is the guide and the traveller in the way of infinite love, beauty, power, attainment, and fulfillment. He is the guardian of the most ancient wisdom, the trailblazer to the highest secret, the beloved friend, whose very being elevates us, bringing new meaning to the spirit of humanity. The Master is guide and friend. Here the words suffused, magical effulgence, love, beauty, power and fulfillment, most ancient wisdom, trailblazer, beloved friend, and elevates illustrate the Sufi's predilection for affect. The Sufi path is devotional, inspirational, and romantic.
I think that's why Baba loved it. So much devotion in Sufism. It's beautiful, not just a dry wisdom path, it's filled with rasa. Go on.
Gum Poppa, a Tibetan master in Milarepa's tradition, says, "For him who is established in the self, it is the same whether he refrains from worldly activities or not. For him who is free from attachment to things, it is the same whether he practices asceticism or not. For him who controls his mind, it is the same whether he partakes of worldly pleasures or not. For him who is unshakable in his love for his teacher, it is the same whether he lives with him or not. For him who has attained the ultimate, it is the same whether he is able to exercise siddhis, psychic powers, or not. When a being realizes the self, he transcends the path. He is free. Gum Poppa tells us that great beings come in all styles and personalities. They may be immersed in the world or not. They may be ascetic or not. The attainment is inside, a state of being."
In all the siddhas, they are wild different. I met a few great beings, and their personalities are different, but the same radiant Shakti and love came from every one of them. Quality of being incredibly alive and vibrant.
Tukaram, the great poet saint of the 17th century Maharashtra, was a humble grocer living in the dusty town of Dehu. He used to sing his ecstatic poems called Abhangas in the temple every night. He echoes the paradox of Gum Poppa. I speak and yet
This is Tukaram now.
I speak and yet I am silent. I have died, but I am alive. I live among people, but in truth I do not. I appear to enjoy, but in fact I have renounced. I am in the world, yet out of it. I have broken free of all bonds. I am not what I appear to be, says Tuka. You want to know? Ask the Lord what I really am. No appearance or concept can limit the perfected master. He transcends the mind.
Go on.
My teacher used to quote the poet Bhartrihari about the natural state of enlightenment. Siddhas.
Oh, this is Baba quoting Bhattacharya, so it's Baba's gloss on Bhattacharya. Yeah.
Siddhas, realized beings, behave in countless different ways. They teach scholars and learn from fools. They fight with heroes and run away from cowards. If people give them gifts, they renounce everything. If there is no one to give them gifts, they go begging. Those in whose heart the master of the world has taken residence behave in contradictory ways. Siddhas, enlightened beings, do not have to pretend because they are saturated with divine bliss. Their senses fall slave to them. They don't fall slave to their senses. There is no distinction for them between self and other, between sin and virtue, between great and small. They may live like beggars, but they are not. They are kings. A siddha is drunk on the knowledge of the Spirit. He knows Aham Brahmasmi, I am God, I am the absolute reality, while also knowing that everyone is God also. Knowing this, he soars with intoxication.
You find that inspiring? Isn't that wonderfully inspiring? There's nothing more inspiring than contemplating the Guru, man number 7. And because what the Guru represents is the highest possibility for us. And it connects us to that highest energy. And it's the energy of love and wisdom and us at our best and freedom. Freedom from the demands of ego and our personhood, which is a great burden. When we're heavily weighed down with our personhood, then life is an incredible burden. It's all a drama of lack and threat and lack and threat and lack, or loss. Threat, lack, and loss. This is our life. But if we let it go, then it's filled by abundance and fulfillment and love and so on. And so when we come under the influence of the great beings, of course, I always feel that I'm in satsang with Baba, but also I honor all the great beings because, and so in satsang we have a rotation of utterances from that. Because I like the notion when the sages talk about the Vedas. They say the Vedas is not these books that have been written down, but it's actually a level of consciousness that exists on a very high plane that if you're a very developed yogi or a great seer, you can tune into. And so the Guru Tattva is something that doesn't belong to any specific guru. So we'll meditate for 7 minutes, and let's at least begin by opening to that influence from the higher power, from man number 7, from that level of consciousness. And however you want to think about that, but let that influence come in, that Shakti, that energy, that divine love, that divine light, that knowingness, just open to it. That also is the influence of your own true self, because it all exists within you. If it doesn't exist within you, there's no hope of ever achieving it. So